I stood at the edge of Section 9 with my camera in hand, watching the ranger's truck disappear down the dirt road behind me. The forest ahead looked ordinary enough, tall pines swaying in the afternoon breeze, sunlight filtering through in golden shafts. But as I took my first step past the weathered wooden marker that read Section 9 Authorized Personnel Only, I noticed something that made my stomach tight. Every single bird had stopped singing. The forest had gone completely, unnaturally silent. And in that silence, I heard it, a faint whisper that sounded exactly like my own voice, coming from somewhere deep within the trees, calling my name. My name is Travis, and I am 28 years old. I have been a wildlife photographer for the past 6 years, traveling across the United States capturing images of nature in its rawest form. I have hiked through the Appalachian Mountains, camped in the deserts of Nevada, and spent weeks in the swamps of Louisiana. I thought I had seen it all. I thought I understood the wilderness. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what I found in Section 9 of the Cascade Ridge National Forest in northern Oregon. Before I tell you what happened in those woods, I want you to do something for me. If you have ever felt that inexplicable pull toward a place you know you should not go, if you have ever ignored a warning because curiosity burned too bright in your chest, leave a comment below. Tell me about it. Because what I experienced changed everything I thought I knew about the world, and I need to know I am not alone in this. It was early October when I first heard about Section 9. I had been staying in a small town called Pinehaven, population barely 300, nestled at the base of the Cascade Ridge Range. The town existed primarily to service the national forest, with a general store, a diner, a gas station, and not much else. I had come to photograph the autumn foliage and hopefully catch some shots of the local elk population during their rutting season. I was having breakfast at Millie's Diner, the only restaurant in town, when I overheard two forest rangers talking in the booth behind me. Their voices were low, careful, but in the quiet morning air I could hear every word. "Found another hiker's campsite abandoned near the Section 9 boundary," one of them said. His voice was gravelly, worn. "Tent still set up, sleeping bag laid out, food hanging in the tree, but no sign of the hiker. That makes 3 this year." "Did you report it?" the other ranger asked. This voice was younger, uncertain. "Of course I reported it, but you know how it goes. Search and rescue comes out, finds nothing, case goes cold, just like all the others." There was a pause, the sound of coffee being sipped. "I am telling you, Ben, there is something wrong with Section 9. Has been for as long as I have worked here. 23 years, and I still will not set foot past that marker after dark." My photographer's instinct kicked in immediately. A restricted area in a national forest, mysterious disappearances, rangers who refused to enter after dark. This was exactly the kind of story that could make my career. I could already envision the photo essay, the haunting images of an off-limits forest section, the article in National Geographic or Outside magazine. I turned around in my booth, trying to appear casual. "Excuse me," I said. "I could not help but overhear. I am a wildlife photographer, and I am wondering if there is any way I could get a permit to photograph in Section 9. Both rangers turned to look at me. The older one had a weathered face, deep lines around his eyes, and a name tag that read Dixon. The younger one, Ben, looked to be in his mid-20s, fresh-faced and nervous. Dixon studied me for a long moment before speaking. "Section 9 is closed to the public," he said flatly. "No permits, no exceptions." "Is there a reason why?" I pressed. "I have permits for every other section of the forest." "Yes," Dixon said. "There is a reason, and the reason is you will not come back out." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but neither ranger smiled. "I am serious," Dixon continued. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. "Listen to me very carefully, son. I have been a ranger in this forest for over 2 decades. I have seen things in Section 9 that I cannot explain, things that make no sense, and I have watched good people walk into those woods and never walk back out. So when I tell you to stay away from Section 9, I'm not trying to protect some bureaucratic regulation. I am trying to save your life." The intensity in his voice sent a chill down my spine, but it also made me more curious. "What kind of things?" I asked. "What have you seen?" Dixon exchanged a glance with Ben, who looked down at his coffee. When Dixon spoke again, his voice was quieter, more reluctant. "Strange lights at night, voices calling from the trees, compasses that spin without stopping, electronics that malfunction, and the silence." He paused. "The birds do not sing in Section 9, have not for years, no one knows why." "Maybe there is a scientific explanation," I suggested. "Magnetic anomaly or—" "We have had scientists out here," Dixon interrupted. "Geologists, biologists, you name it. None of them can explain it, and none of them wanted to stay once the sun went down." He stood up, tossing a few bills on the table for his breakfast. "Take my advice, Travis. Photograph the rest of the forest. It is beautiful this time of year, but stay away from Section 9. He walked out, Ben following quickly behind him. But the warning only fueled my determination. Over the next 3 days, I did my research. I went to the tiny public library in Pinehaven and searched through old newspaper archives. What I found was disturbing. The first disappearance in Section 9 was recorded in 1952, a hunter who went into the woods and never returned. Then another in 1957, a forest ranger conducting a routine survey. The pattern continued through the decades, sometimes with years between incidents, sometimes multiple disappearances in a single year. Most recently, in addition to the 3 hikers Dixon had mentioned, there was a report from 8 months ago about a geological survey team. 4 people had entered Section 9 to take soil samples. Only 2 came back out, and both refused to talk about what happened to their colleagues. I also found something else, historical records from before the area became a national forest. The local Native American tribes, primarily the Molala people, had considered the area sacred and dangerous. They called it the place where spirits forget their names. They believed it was a thin space, where the boundary between the living world and the world of the dead became permeable. The more I learned, the more obsessed I became. This was not just a story. This was the story. The photographs I could capture, the mystery I could document, it would define my career. I spent the 4th day preparing. I bought extra batteries, backup memory cards, a satellite phone, flares, a first aid kit, and enough food and water for 5 days. I told myself I was being cautious, professional. But deep down, I knew I was going into Section 9 no matter what I found, no matter what the warning said. On the 5th morning, October 7th, I loaded my Jeep and drove to the northern access road that led to Section 9. The road was marked with multiple signs. Restricted area, no public access, violators will be prosecuted. I drove past all of them. About 2 miles in, I encountered a locked gate. I parked my Jeep, shouldered my backpack, grabbed my camera equipment, and started hiking. The forest was beautiful that morning. Golden autumn light filtered through the canopy, and the air smelled of pine and earth. For the first hour, I heard birds singing, saw squirrels darting through the undergrowth, noticed deer tracks in the soft soil. Everything seemed normal. Then I reached the boundary marker. It was a simple wooden post driven into the ground, with Section 9 carved into it. Someone had also spray-painted "Turn Back" in faded red letters across the sign. Beyond the marker, the forest looked identical to the forest behind me. The same trees, the same undergrowth, the same dappled sunlight. But the moment I stepped past that marker, everything changed. The bird song stopped, not gradually but instantly, as if someone had flipped a switch. The forest fell into a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stopped walking and listened, straining to hear any sound, any indication of life. Nothing. Even the wind seemed to have died. And then I heard it, a voice, distant but clear, calling my name. "Travis." It sounded exactly like my own voice, as if I were calling to myself from somewhere deep in the trees ahead. Every logical part of my brain told me to turn around, to get back across that boundary, to listen to the warnings. But the photographer in me, the part that had always pushed boundaries and taken risks for the perfect shot, urged me forward. I pulled out my camera and took a photo of the boundary marker, then another of the forest ahead. Through my viewfinder, everything looked normal, but the silence remained absolute. I am telling you this story because I need you to understand the truth about Section 9. And if what I share helps even one person avoid the mistakes I made, then reliving these memories will be worth it. So, if you are finding this story valuable, if it is keeping you on the edge of your seat, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories like this, because what happened next changed everything. I walked deeper into Section 9, following what appeared to be an old game trail. My boots crunched on fallen leaves, the only sound in the oppressive silence. I kept my camera ready, taking shots of the unusual formations in the trees, the way the light seemed to bend strangely through certain gaps in the canopy. After about 30 minutes of hiking, I found the first campsite. It was exactly as the ranger had described. A modern tent still upright and intact, a sleeping bag unrolled inside, a backpack leaning against a tree, food supplies hanging from a branch, properly stored to keep them away from bears, but no sign of the camper. I approached slowly, my skin prickling with unease. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded flat in the dead air, refusing to echo. "Is anyone here?" No response. I photographed the scene from multiple angles, then carefully checked inside the tent. The sleeping bag was laid out as if someone had just gotten out of it. A book lay open on top, a thriller novel bookmarked at page 247. A water bottle sat nearby, still half full. A watch was fastened around the sleeping bag's stuffed sack, its hands moving normally, showing the time as 10:47 a.m. But here is what made my blood run cold. Scattered around the sleeping bag were dozens of small pieces of paper, each with the same phrase written over and over in increasingly frantic handwriting. "I am still ME. I am still ME. I am still ME." I picked up one of the notes and my hands trembled. The handwriting started neat and controlled at the top of the page, but by the bottom, it had devolved into barely legible scrawls. What had this person been so afraid of forgetting? I backed out of the tent and looked around the campsite more carefully. That is when I noticed the trees. Someone had carved words into the bark of every tree surrounding the campsite. Not names or initials like you might expect from campers. These were statements, reminders, desperate affirmations. "My name is Robert Chambers. I am from Denver. I have a wife named Melissa. I have 2 daughters, Katie and Emma. I am 43 years old. I work as an accountant. I drove a blue Honda. I am still Robert. I am still me." The carvings went around the entire perimeter of the camp, maybe 20 trees in total, each one bearing these biographical facts carved deep into the wood. And on the last tree, the final carving simply said, "I cannot remember my face." I took photos of everything, my professional instinct overriding my growing dread. But my hands were shaking so badly that I had to brace the camera against trees to keep the shot steady. I should have turned back then. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run back to the boundary, to get out of Section 9 while I still could. But I told myself I had come this far. I needed more. I needed answers. I continued hiking deeper into Section 9. The silence grew heavier with each step, pressing against my eardrums like physical pressure. I checked my watch, 11:23 a.m. I checked my compass and my stomach dropped. The needle was spinning, slowly but continuously, making complete rotations without ever settling on a direction. I pulled out my phone to check the GPS. No signal, which was expected in deep forest, But when I opened the GPS app, the map showed my location as the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I closed the app and reopened it. Same result. I tried my satellite phone next. Static, nothing but static. The forest around me looked normal, almost aggressively normal. Pine trees, ferns, fallen logs covered in moss. But something felt wrong about it, like a photograph that is almost perfect but has one detail out of place that your brain cannot quite identify. I came to a small clearing around noon, and I decided to stop for lunch. I was only a few hours into Section 9, but I already felt exhausted, as if the silence itself was draining my energy. I sat on a fallen log, pulled out a sandwich and tried to eat, but the moment I took a bite, I heard it again. "Travis." Closer this time, much closer, and it was definitely my voice, my exact tone and inflection. I stood up quickly, spinning around. "Who is there?" I shouted. The forest gave nothing back, not even an echo. It was like shouting into a void. "Travis," the voice said again, this time from behind me. I spun around, nothing. "Travis," to my left. "Travis," to my right. "Travis," above me. My name was coming from every direction, spoken in my own voice, surrounding me. I grabbed my camera and started taking photos wildly, spinning in circles, hoping to capture something, anything that might explain this. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. I stood in the clearing, breathing hard, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had recorded audio during the incident, and when I played it back, I heard only my own voice shouting, "Who is there?" followed by silence. The other voice, my voice calling my name, was not on the recording. That should have been my breaking point. That should have been the moment I turned around and hiked back to safety. But you know what I did inst. I checked the photos I had just taken. Most of them showed only trees and forest. But in 3 of the images, barely visible in the deep shadows between the pines, there was a figure. A human shape standing perfectly still, watching me. In each photo, it was in a different location, as if it had moved between shots. And though the images were dark and unclear, I could see enough to know one thing. The figure was wearing the exact same clothes I was wearing. I am not ashamed to admit I was terrified, but I was also fascinated. This was impossible, all of it, and impossibilities make for incredible photographs. I kept going. By 2:00 p.m., I had covered maybe 3 miles into Section 9. The terrain had started to change, becoming rockier, with steep ravines cutting through the forest. I found myself following a narrow path that ran alongside a small creek, the first running water I had encountered since crossing the boundary. That is when I found the second campsite. This one was older, the tent partially collapsed, the fabric faded and weathered. Vegetation had started growing up around it, suggesting it had been there for at least a year, maybe more. Unlike the first camp, this one had been torn apart. The tent had gashes in it, the sleeping bag was shredded, supplies were scattered everywhere. But it was not the destruction that caught my attention, it was the photographs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, scattered around the campsite like fallen leaves. Polaroids, printed digital photos, even some older film photographs. I knelt down and started looking through them. They were all the same. Every single photograph showed the same image, a person standing in the forest staring at the camera. In some photos, the person was close, in others, far away. Sometimes standing behind trees, sometimes in clearings, sometimes just barely visible in the shadows. But always the same person in the same pose, staring directly at the lens. The person in the photographs was wearing jeans, a red flannel shirt, and a gray jacket. I picked up one of the more recent-looking Polaroids and studied it closely. The person's face was blurry, out of focus, as if they had moved just as the shutter clicked. But the clothes were crystal clear. I was wearing jeans, a red flannel shirt, and a gray jacket. My breath caught in my throat. I grabbed another photo, then another. In every single image, the figure was wearing my exact outfit, and as I looked closer, I could see other details. The figure carried a camera like mine. The figure wore boots like mine. The figure had the same build, the same height as me. I dropped the photos and scrambled backward away from the campsite. This was not right. None of this was right. Someone had been taking photos of me, hundreds of photos, before I ever set foot in Section 9. That was impossible. Unless these photographs were not from before. Unless they were from now. Unless somehow someone was photographing me at this exact moment and the images were appearing here in this abandoned campsite. I pulled out my own camera and took a photo of the scattered pictures. When I looked at the image on my LCD screen, my blood turned to ice. In my photograph, among all the scattered Polaroids and prints on the ground, there was one new image that had not been there when I looked with my naked eye. A Polaroid still developing, the image slowly fading into view. And on that Polaroid was me, kneeling in the campsite, holding my camera, taking a picture of the scattered photographs. Someone had just photographed me, photographing the photographs. I looked around wildly, spinning in every direction, searching for whoever had taken that picture. But the forest was empty, silent, and still. There was no one. There was no way anyone could have taken that photo, developed it, and placed it on the ground in the split second it took me to snap my image. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my camera. I had to get out. I had to leave Section 9 right now. Warnings be damned. This had gone far beyond anything I could explain or rationalize. I turned to head back the way I came, but that is when I realized my mistake. I could not remember which direction I had come from. The creek ran beside me, but I could not remember if I had been following it upstream or downstream. The narrow path I had been on seemed to branch in 3 directions, and all of them looked equally traveled. I pulled out my compass, but the needle was still spinning uselessly. I tried to retrace my steps mentally. I had been following the creek, yes, but from which direction? I closed my eyes and tried to visualize the last hour of hiking, but the memories were foggy, indistinct, as if they had happened weeks ago rather than minutes ago. That is when I felt the first real spike of panic. I was lost, completely lost, in a place where people disappeared without a trace. I forced myself to breathe, to think logically. I pulled out my GPS unit again, but it still showed me in the middle of the ocean. I tried the satellite phone, still static. I looked at my watch, 2:34 p.m. I had plenty of daylight left. If I just picked a direction and walked carefully, marking my path, I would eventually either find my way out or back to a landmark I recognized. I chose what I thought was the path back and started walking. I tied strips of bright orange surveyor's tape to trees every 50 yards, marking my route. The silence pressed down on me, heavier than ever. Without the distraction of exploration and photography, I became acutely aware of just how unnatural this place felt. After 30 minutes of hiking, I came to a clearing that looked familiar. My heart leaped. I had been here before, I was sure of it. This was the clearing where I had stopped for lunch, where I had heard my name being called. But as I approached, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. Tied to one of the trees at the edge of the clearing was a strip of bright orange surveyor's tape. My tape, my marker, which meant I had been walking in a circle. I walked around the clearing and I found 6 more strips of orange tape tied to trees. 7 markers total, but I had only tied 1 marker in this clearing just now when I entered it for the 2nd time. Unless I had been here 7 times. Unless I had been walking in circles for much longer than 30 minutes. I checked my watch, 2:38 p.m. That could not be right. I had hiked for at least 30 minutes, probably closer to 45, since leaving the campsite with all the photographs. But my watch insisted only 4 minutes had passed. I sat down heavily on the same fallen log where I had tried to eat lunch. My sandwich was still there, sitting on the log right where I had left it. But the bread was stale, hard, as if it had been sitting there for days. I picked it up and it crumbled in my hands, dry and moldy. Time was not working properly in Section 9. I pulled out a protein bar from my pack and ate it mechanically, trying to form a plan. The sun was still high in the sky, but I could not trust that anymore. I could not trust my watch, my compass, my GPS, or even my own memories. Everything in Section 9 was wrong, fundamentally and inexplicably wrong. I decided to walk in a straight line, due west if my compass had been working, toward where I thought the boundary should be. I would not stop, would not investigate anything else, would not let myself get distracted. I would just walk until I either hit the boundary or ran into something that gave me a clear sense of direction. I walked for what felt like hours. The light never changed. It remained perpetual afternoon, the sun frozen in the same position in the sky. I tied orange tape every 50 yards, and I never encountered any of my previous markers, which gave me hope that I was finally making progress. Then I found the cairn. It was a stack of stones, about 4 feet tall, sitting in the middle of the path. Someone had carefully balanced flat rocks on top of each other, creating a crude tower. At first, I thought it might be a trail marker, something left by hikers or rangers. But as I got closer, I saw what was written on the stones. Words scratched into each rock with something sharp, and not random words but sentences, messages. Do not let it make you forget. Your name is real, hold on to it. The photographs lie, you are not who they show. Count your fingers, count them every hour. If you hear your own voice, cover your ears. The trees are watching, they remember everyone. There were more, maybe 20 stones total, each bearing a warning or instruction. I photographed each one, my hand surprisingly steady now. I had moved beyond fear into something else, a kind of numb acceptance that I was in a place that operated by different laws than the world I knew. At the base of the cairn, scratched into the largest stone, was a final message. I built this on my 3rd day. If you are reading this, I am still here somewhere. My name is Robert Chambers. I am from Denver. Please tell my wife I tried to remember. Robert Chambers, the name from the first campsite, the man who had carved his biographical details into every tree, desperately trying to hold onto his identity. I looked around the forest with new eyes. How many people were still here, lost in Section 9? How many had left messages, warnings, desperate attempts to communicate with whoever came after them? Robert, I shouted into the silence. Robert Chambers, can you hear me? Nothing, just the oppressive, absolute silence. I walked past the cairn and continued in what I hoped was a straight line. The forest seemed to grow denser, the trees closer together, their branches intertwining overhead to block out more of the light. Though the sun had not moved, it somehow seemed darker, shadows growing longer and deeper. That is when I start. Seeing them. Figures standing between the trees, always at the edge of my vision, always just barely visible in my peripheral sight. But when I turned to look directly at them, they were gone. Or were they? The shadows were so deep and the trees so close together that it was impossible to be sure. I kept walking, faster now, trying to ignore the figures. But they multiplied, more and more of them standing in the trees, watching me. And they were all wearing the same clothes I was wearing. This is not real, I said aloud, trying to convince myself. This is not real. These are hallucinations, stress, fear. They are not real. But even as I said it, I knew it was not true. Everything in Section 9 was real, just real in a way that should not be possible. I do not know when I started running. One moment I was walking quickly, the next I was sprinting through the forest, my backpack bouncing against my shoulders, my camera equipment rattling. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs threatened to give out, until I could not run anymore. When I finally stopped, bent over with my hands on my knees, gasping for air. I looked up and realized I was standing at the cairn again. The same cairn, the same stack of stones with the same warnings. I had run in a circle. Or had I? I approached the cairn and examined the messages on the stones. They were the same word for word, but at the base, where Robert Chambers had scratched his final message, there was something new. A second message, freshly scratched, the stone dust still bright and unweathered. Travis, I have been watching you. Do not trust what you see. Do not trust what you hear. And whatever you do, do not look at the photographs. They will make you forget. They made me forget. I do not remember what I look like anymore. I see myself in the pictures, but I do not recognize the face. Is that really me? I do not know. I do not know. My name is Travis. I am 28 years old. I am a photographer. I must not forget. I must not forget. My handwriting, my words, but I had not written them. I backed away from the cairn, my mind reeling. This was not possible. I had not been to this cairn before. I had not written that message. But the handwriting was definitely mine, the same loops and slants I had been making since I learned to write. I pulled out my camera and checked the timestamp on my photos. The cairn images I had taken earlier were timestamped 3:47 p.m. My watch now showed 3:02 p.m. Time was not just slowing down or speeding up. It was moving backward, or forward, or in circles just like the paths through the forest. I realized with growing horror what Section 9 really was. It was not just a dangerous place. It was a trap, a maze that existed outside normal time and space. And everyone who entered became lost in it, walking in circles, leaving messages to themselves, slowly forgetting who they were as the forest erased their identity piece by piece. If you are still watching this, still following this story, I need you to pay attention to what I am about to tell you. Because this is where I started to understand the true nature of Section 9, and this is where I learned how to survive. And if this story is helping you understand the reality of places like this, places that should not exist but do, then please share it. Let others know. Because knowledge might be the only thing that saves someone else from making the same mistakes I made. I sat down next to the cairn and forced myself to think clearly. There had to be a pattern, a logic, even if it was alien to everything I understood. I pulled out my notebook and started writing down everything I knew. 1. Section 9 existed outside normal time. My watch was unreliable. 2. Compasses did not work. I could not trust directions. 3. I kept walking in circles, returning to the same locations. 4. I was seeing figures that looked like me, wearing my clothes. 5. Photographs appeared that had not been there before, showing me. 6. I was leaving messages to myself that I did not remember writing. I stopped writing and stared at that last point. Messages I did not remember writing, but they were in my handwriting, which meant either I was blacking out and losing time, or I was not the first Travis to enter Section 9 today. The thought hit me like a physical blow. What if Section 9 did not just trap people in space, but in time? What if I was not just lost, but lost across multiple moments, multiple timelines? What if there were dozens of versions of me, all wandering these woods, all leaving messages, all seeing each other in the distance? It would explain the figures. It would explain the photographs. It would explain how I could find messages in my own handwriting that I had not written yet. But it also meant something terrifying. It meant that I was not just lost in the forest. I was lost in time. And if I could not find my way out soon, I would become like Robert Chambers, like all the others who disappeared. I would walk these woods forever, slowly forgetting who I was, leaving desperate messages to versions of myself that might never read them. I had to escape, but how do you escape from a place that exists outside of time? I thought about the boundary marker, the point where I had entered Section 9. That was the key. That was the only fixed point I knew, the threshold between the normal world and this place. If I could find my way back to that marker, I could cross back over, and maybe I would be free. But which direction was it? I looked around at the forest, all identical trees, all the same dense undergrowth. Without a compass, without any sense of direction, how could I find my way to a single wooden post in thousands of acres of forest? Then I remembered something the ranger Dixon had said. The birds do not sing in Section 9, which meant at the boundary there should be a transition. There should be a point where I could hear birds again, where the unnatural silence ended and normal sounds began. I just had to walk until I heard birds. I stood up, shouldered my pack, and started walking. But this time, I did not try to navigate by direction. Instead, I stopped every few minutes and stood completely still, listening as hard as I could for any sound, any indication that I was getting closer to the boundary. For the first hour, or what felt like an hour, I heard nothing but my own footsteps and breathing. The silence remained absolute, but I kept going, changing direction whenever I felt like I was walking in circles, trying to create an irregular path that could not loop back on itself. And then faintly, I heard it. A bird, just one, distant but definitely a bird singing. I turned toward the sound and walked faster. The bird's song faded, then came back stronger. I was going the right way. My heart pounded with hope and relief. I was going to make it. I was going to get out of Section 9. The bird's songs grew louder. Multiple birds now, a whole chorus. I started running again, crashing through undergrowth, not caring about the noise, just desperate to reach the boundary. And then I saw it. The wooden marker, the sign that read Section 9, the spray-painted warning to turn back. I had never been so happy to see anything in my life. I ran toward it, tears of relief streaming down my face. 10 yards away, 5 yards, almost there. I crossed the boundary line, stepping back into the normal forest beyond Section 9. The bird songs cut off instantly. I froze, my blood turning to ice. I spun around. Behind me, I could hear birds singing. In front of me, silence. I had crossed the wrong way. I had gone deeper into Section 9, not out of it. The boundary marker I was looking at was not the one I had entered through. It was another marker on the opposite side of Section 9. And the normal forest I had been hearing, the one with the bird songs, that had been Section 9, which meant I had been navigating backward, following the silence instead of moving away from it. I sank to my knees, despair washing over me. I had been so close, so certain that I had found the way out. But Section 9 had tricked me again, turned my own logic against me. How was this possible? How could the boundary work both ways? How could Section 9 be both the silent area and the area with bird songs? Unless Section 9 was growing, unless it was expanding, and the boundary I had just crossed was new, fresh, recently claimed by whatever force controlled this place. I looked at my watch, 6:13 p.m. The sun was finally setting. I could see the light fading through the trees, but I did not trust it. I did not trust anything anymore. I pulled out my camera and reviewed all the photos I had taken throughout the day. There were hundreds of them, documenting my journey into Section 9. But as I scrolled through them, I noticed something strange. In every photo in the background, barely visible but definitely there, was a figure. Sometimes far away, sometimes close, but always present, always watching, always wearing my clothes. And in the most recent photos, the ones I had taken while running toward what I thought was the boundary, the figure was getting closer. Photo by photo, it was approaching, moving from deep in the background to the middle distance to just a few yards away. In the last photo I had taken, snapped right before I crossed the false boundary, the figure was standing directly behind me, close enough to touch, close enough that I should have seen it when I turned around, close enough that I should have felt its presence. I slowly turned around, afraid of what I might see. The figure stood there 5 feet away, completely still. It wore my clothes, carried my camera, had my build and height, but its face was blurred, unfocused, like a photograph taken with a shaking hand. Where eyes should have been, there were just dark smudges. Where a mouth should have been just a vague D. Oppression in the flesh. "Who are you?" I whispered. The figure tilted its head, mimicking the gesture I had just made. Then it raised its camera and took a photograph of me. The flash went off, blinding me. I stumbled backward, spots dancing in my vision. When I could see again, the figure was gone. But lying on the ground where it had been standing was a Polaroid photograph, still developing. I approached it carefully, knowing I should not look, remembering Robert Chambers' warning about the photographs. But I could not help myself. I picked it up and watched as the image slowly faded into view. It showed me standing in the forest, holding my camera, staring at the place where the figure had been. But my face in the photograph was wrong. It was blurred like the figure's had been, features indistinct and smudged. And as I stared at the image, I felt something slip away in my mind, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. What did I look like? I tried to picture my own face and found I could not. Brown hair, yes, but what shade? What style? Eyes, but what color? I knew I had a nose, a mouth, but I could not visualize them. It was like trying to remember a dream that was fading even as I grasped for it. I dropped the photograph and pulled out my phone, desperately opening the camera app and switching it to selfie mode. But the screen showed only static, white noise where my face should be. The photographs were stealing my identity, erasing me piece by piece. I threw the phone down and pressed my hands against my face, feeling the solid reality of flesh and bone. I had a face. I existed. I was real. I was Travis. I was 28 years old. I was a photographer. But even as I repeated these facts to myself, I felt them becoming hollow, meaningless sounds without substance behind them. I had to get out, now, before I forgot everything. I forced myself to think through the panic. The boundary marker was false, or maybe it was real, but Section 9 had expanded beyond it. Either way, I could not trust the boundaries anymore. I needed a different approach. Then I remembered the creek. I had found a creek earlier, running water moving through the forest. Water flows downhill, always downhill, and eventually it would lead out of the mountains, out of the forest, out of Section 9. If I could find that creek again and follow it, truly follow it downstream without getting distracted or turned around, maybe I could escape. I pulled out my notebook and wrote in large letters, "Follow the creek downstream. Do not stop. Do not investigate anything. Just follow the water." Then I tore out the page and tucked it into my jacket pocket, where I could easily grab it if I needed a reminder. The sun was setting now, or appearing to set, painting the forest in deep orange and red light. I did not want to be in Section 9 after dark. I had no idea what this place became when the sun went down, and I did not want to find out. I started walking, searching for the creek. The forest was growing darker by the minute, shadows pooling between the trees like spilled ink. I pulled out my flashlight and clicked it on. The beam seemed weak, barely pushing back the gathering darkness. After maybe 20 minutes, I heard it, the soft burble of running water. I moved toward the sound and found the creek, the same one I had followed earlier. The water looked black in the fading light, moving swiftly over rocks and fallen branches. I stepped into the creek, the icy water soaking through my boots, and started following it downstream. The current tugged at my ankles, and I used that pull to guide me, making sure I was always moving in the direction the water flowed. The forest grew darker still. My flashlight beam created stark shadows that jumped and twisted with every movement. I heard sounds now, breaking the oppressive silence. Whispers, rustling, footsteps that matched my own pace but came from the trees on either side of the creek. I kept walking, eyes fixed on the water, forcing myself not to look at the forest around me. The note in my pocket crinkled with each step, a reminder of my purpose. Follow the creek. Do not stop. Something splashed in the water behind me. I did not turn around. "Travis," a voice called from the darkness, my voice. I did not turn around. More voices now, all speaking at once, all saying my name in my own voice. A chorus of Travises calling from the forest. I did not turn around. The creek widened, the water getting deeper, now up to my knees. The current was stronger here, pulling at me with surprising force. I had to brace myself against rocks to avoid being swept away. And then I saw lights ahead, dozens of them floating through the trees like fireflies. But they were too large, too steady to be insects. They bobbed and weaved through the forest, sometimes disappearing behind trees, sometimes coming closer to the creek. As one of the lights drifted near, I saw what it really was, a cam. A flash going off repeatedly in the darkness. Click flash, click flash, click flash. Photographing nothing or photographing everything, suspended in the air with no visible person holding it. More lights joined it, until the forest was filled with floating cameras, all taking pictures, their flashes creating a strobe effect that turned the world into a series of frozen moments. In the brief illuminations, I saw them. Figures, hundreds of them standing between the trees, all wearing different clothes, different styles from different eras, but all with the same blurred faces. Some were close to the creek, others far back in the forest, all standing perfectly still, watching me wade through the water. And all of them were raising cameras, adding their own flashes to the chaos of light. I was being photographed by everyone who had ever gotten lost in Section 9. I splashed through the water, moving as fast as I could, the creek now deep enough that I had to swim in places. The current pulled me along, which was good. I let it carry me, trusting the water to lead me out. The flashes were everywhere now, so frequent that it was almost like daylight, a stuttering, unreliable daylight that showed me glimpses of horror. In one flash, the figures were far away. In the next, they were closer. Flash by flash, they were approaching, closing in on the creek from both sides. I went underwater, the cold shocking my system. When I surfaced, gasping, I had been carried around a bend. The forest opened up slightly, and in the distance, I saw something that made my heart leap. Electric lights, real ones, steady and bright. A building or buildings, artificial illumination cutting through the darkness. The ranger station. It had to be. I had made it to the edge of the forest. The current was pulling me faster now, the creek turning into a real stream. I let it carry me, too exhausted to swim anymore, just trying to keep my head above water. Behind me, I could still see the flashes, still hear the click of cameras, still sense the figures following me through the forest. The stream widened further, became a small river. The electric lights were getting closer. I could see the shape of buildings now, the ranger station and what looked like a parking area. And then, without any warning or transition, I was out. The silence ended. I heard night insects, an owl hooting, wind in the trees. Normal sounds, beautiful sounds. I dragged myself onto the riverbank and lay there, coughing up water, shivering with cold and exhaustion and relief. I had escaped Section 9. I do not know how long I lay there before I heard voices. Real voices, human voices speaking with concern and surprise. Hands helped me up, wrapped a blanket around me. I recognized Ranger Dixon's weathered face in the flashlight beams. "Travis," he said, shocked, "you have been gone for 3 days. We were about to send search and rescue into Section 9. "3 days, I croaked. "No, it was just 1 day. I went in this morning." Dixon exchanged glances with the other rangers. "Son, you entered Section 9 3 days ago. It is October 10th. We have been searching the perimeter, but no one wanted to go in after you." I pulled out my phone, hands shaking. The date confirmed what he said. October 10th, 11:47 p.m. I had lost 3 days in Section 9, though it had felt like only one afternoon and evening. They took me to the ranger station, gave me dry clothes and hot coffee. I told them everything that had happened, and Dixon listened without interrupting, his face growing graver with each detail. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You are the first person to come back out of Section 9 in 15 years, he said quietly. "The only reason people get out now is if they never make it past the boundary. Once you go deep, once you start seeing the things you saw, people do not come back." "What about Robert Chambers?" I asked. "Have you ever found him or any of the others?" Dixon shook his head. "We find their campsites sometimes, right on the edge of Section 9 like they just appeared there, but never the people themselves. Whatever Section 9 is, it does not give people back." "But I got out," I said. "You did," Dixon agreed. "And I would like to know how, because maybe it could help us find the others, or at least understand what that place is." I thought about it, trying to piece together what I had done differently. "I followed the water," I said finally. "The creek. I did not try to navigate by direction or time or landmarks. I just followed the water downstream, and I did not stop no matter what I saw or heard." Dixon considered this. "Water does not lie," he said thoughtfully. "It follows gravity, physics, natural laws. Maybe those things still work in Section 9, even when everything else is twisted." I spent the night at the ranger station, and the next morning Dixon drove me back to town. My Jeep was still where I had left it, untouched. But I checked the back seat where I had left my backup equipment. I found something that had not been there before. A photograph, an old Polaroid, slightly faded but still clear. It showed a man standing in the forest, smiling at the camera. He wore clothes from the 1980s and his face was perfectly visible, clear and sharp. On the back, written in neat handwriting, "Robert Chambers, first day in Section 9, feeling confident. October 15, 1983. If you find this, tell Melissa I am sorry." I showed it to Dixon. He stared at the photograph for a long time, then carefully took it from me. "I will make sure his wife gets this," he said quietly. "She deserves to know he did not forget her, even at the end." I went back to my motel room and downloaded all the photographs from my camera, hundreds of images documenting my time in Section 9. But as I reviewed them on my laptop, I noticed something impossible. In the metadata, the timestamps were all wrong. The photos were not from October 7th through 10th. They were from dozens of different dates, spread across the last 40 years. Some were from the 1980s, some from the 1990s, scattered dates all the way up to the present day. It was as if my camera had been taking photographs, not just in Section 9, but across time itself, capturing images from every moment that Section 9 had existed. And in every single photograph, somewhere in the background was the blurred figure, always watching, always present, wearing different clothes in different eras, following everyone who had ever entered Section 9. I selected the clearest photos, the ones that best documented what I had experienced, and I prepared to release them to the public. The world needed to know about Section 9, needed to understand that there were places in this world that existed outside our understanding of reality. But before I could publish anything, I received a visit from 2 federal agents. They were polite but firm. The photographs were classified, they said. Section 9 was a matter of national security. I would need to turn over all my images and footage, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and never speak about what I had experienced. I refused. These were my photographs, my experience, my story. People had a right to know. The agents looked at each other, then back at me. The older one, a woman with steel gray hair, spoke carefully. "Mr. Travis, we understand your position, but you need to understand something. Section 9 is not the only place like this. There are 17 similar locations across the United States, each one with different properties, different dangers. We keep them classified not to hide them from the public, but because knowledge of them seems to make them stronger. The more people know about Section 9, the more it expands. It is like the place feeds on attention, on being observed and thought about. Every time someone disappears in Section 9 and it makes the news, the boundary pushes outward," the other agent added. "We have been monitoring it for decades. Right now it covers about 12 square miles. 40 years ago, it was less than 1 square mile. If you publish these photographs, if this story goes viral, Section 9 could expand exponentially. It could consume the entire forest, maybe even spread beyond it. I looked at my photographs, at the documentation of impossible things. So what am I supposed to do? Just pretend it did not happen? No, the woman said. We are asking you to be strategic about how you share this information. Tell your story, but do not provide specific locations. Do not show photographs that could help someone identify exactly where Section 9 is. Make it clear this is dangerous, that people should not go looking for it. Turn it into a warning instead of an invitation. I thought about Robert Chambers, about all the others who had disappeared. I thought about the blurred figures with stolen faces, walking in circles through time, forgetting who they were. All right, I said finally. I will tell the story my way, but I am not signing any non-disclosure agreement, and I am not giving you all my photographs. The world needs to know these places exist, even if we cannot map them. The agents did not like it, but they agreed. They left me with a warning to be careful, and a phone number to call if I ever experienced any residual effects from my time in Section 9. Residual effects. I laughed bitterly at the phrase after they left, because I was already experiencing them. I could not remember my own face. Oh, I could look in a mirror and see myself, but the moment I looked away, the image faded from my mind. I could describe myself in general terms, but I could not picture myself. It was like the photographs in Section 9 had stolen something essential from me. And sometimes, late at night, I heard my own voice calling my name from dark corners of my apartment. I never looked to see what was there. But I am alive, I got out, and that makes me one of the lucky ones. Now, months later, I am sharing this story because I made a promise to myself while I was trapped in Section 9. If I survived, I would warn others. I would make sure people understood that there are places in this world that should not exist, places that trap you not just in space but in time, places that steal your identity piece by piece until you cannot remember your own face. Section 9 is real. Places like it are real. And they are waiting for people like me, people like you, people who are too curious, too confident, too certain that they can handle anything the wilderness throws at them. The rangers warned me. I went anyway, and I barely made it back. If you take anything from this story, take this. Some warnings exist for a reason. Some boundaries should not be crossed. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. And if you ever find yourself in a forest where the birds have stopped singing, where your compass spins endlessly, where you hear your own voice calling from the trees, turn around. Turn around immediately and do not look back. Follow the water if you can and do not stop for anything. Because Section 9 is not the only place like this. There are others, scattered across the country, waiting, and they are hungry for people who do not listen to warnings. I am Travis. I am 28 years old. I am a photographer. I went into Section 9 and I came back out, but I left something behind in those woods, something I can never get back. My face, my identity, the certainty of who I am. And sometimes in my photographs, in the background of shots I take of ordinary places, I see a figure, blurred and indistinct, watching me from a distance, wearing the clothes I wore in Section 9. I think part of me is still there, walking in circles, leaving messages to myself, slowly forgetting. And I think eventually, that part of me will find a way back to the rest of me. I just hope when it does, I remember who I am. If this story helped you understand the reality of places like Section 9, if it warned you away from making the same mistakes I made, then please share it. Let others know, because knowledge might be what saves someone's life. And if you have ever experienced anything similar, if you have been to a place that felt wrong in ways you could not explain, leave a comment. Tell me your story, because I am starting to realize that Section 9 is just the beginning, just one piece of a much larger puzzle. And I am going to find out what that puzzle is. But I will never, Ever go back to Section 9? Some doors, once you walk through them, change you forever, and some doors should never be opened in the first place. The Rangers warned me. I went anyway. Do not make the same mistake. Remember my story. Remember Robert Chambers. Remember all the others who walked into Section 9 and never came back. And if you ever see a place with a warning sign, a boundary marker, a ranger telling you to stay away, listen to them. Because the forest is not always just a forest. Sometimes it is a trap. Sometimes it exists outside of time. And sometimes it collects people the way a photographer collects images, freezing them in a single moment that repeats forever. I am Travis. I went into Section 9. I came back. But I am not sure I came back whole. And every day, I can feel the pull to go back, to walk into those silent woods one more time, to find the version of myself that is still there, still walking, still trying to remember. But I will not go. I cannot go, because if I do, I know I will never leave again. This is my warning to you. This is my story. This is the truth about Section 9. And the truth is, some places should never be found.